Let's start with the fundamentals of designing a combat encounter. Again, this is assuming that we're making a fairly general kind of turn-based RPG. You might need to adapt these ideas a bit if your own project strays pretty far from the core of that genre, but I think that you'll find that in general, this will still be a useful model. It might just need some tweaking for your own needs. So, turn-based RPG combat can get pretty complex and layered. Status effects, damage types, character abilities, synergies, enemy aggro manipulation. These components are important, but let's strip these away for now. Those extra systems are not necessary for turn-based combat to have strategy. You can, in fact, create very diverse combat situations by manipulating only two things: enemy life and enemy damage. These are all you need to cover the absolute fundamentals of RPG combat: threat assessment and priority targets. So let's explore how much depth we can create from these two things alone, before bringing in more layers of complexity later. This is based on how players naturally think whenever they're engaged in combat. A good understanding of this is key to building solid encounters. Think of this as the most basic building blocks of an encounter. It's the dough of your combat pizza. Get this foundation right, and everything else flows much easier. It also helps to kickstart the design process. It gives you a starting point before getting into the nitty-gritty details. It helps to make combat design feel natural and easy. Okay, so first, let's go through a battle. Let's go through a battle. There we go. There's a battle. You've seen a battle before. So, to better frame this combat design model, let's think about the most basic kind of decision making a player makes when engaged in turn-based combat. Okay, just put yourself in the mind of a player about to do some turn-based combat here. Zap! A turn-based battle starts. You look at the enemies that show up. So first, threat assessment. Is your party in any shape to be fighting at all, or should you run away if you can? Do you recognize any of the enemies, or are they new? If these enemies are not new, are they dangerous? How much trouble are you in? If the enemies are new, are they palette swaps or recolors of previous enemies? If so, you can presume they're similar to those but stronger. How much trouble are you in? If these enemies are completely new, how nasty are they looking? Are you in shape to be fighting something new? Or do you need to play it safe and presume they're dangerous? Were the other enemies in this area so far wrecking you? Are there any design similarities? So it might not be like the same sprite, but it might be sort of in a similar style as certain enemies. There might be some things in common. So this is like the decision that happens the first second when a battle begins. Like your brain goes through those questions instantly. You're not even going to realize this. This is just if you've played turn-based combat, the moment a battle begins, your brain goes through all these questions instantly. It's like that. Now, this was the decision of do you run away or not? If you decide to stay, here comes the next round of questions that your brain now constantly cycles in your head. All right, among these guys, who is the most dangerous? Who can I kill quickly? Who can die later? How do I reduce the enemy's threat level as quickly and efficiently as possible? Who among them would it be a waste of time to attack first? If the enemies are all unknowns, then those questions are harder to answer. You need to make educated guesses based on their art, their names, if they resemble previous enemies, their size. One of them might be wizard coded, so if they are, they might have like a nasty nuke spell. Some of them might look like a healer, so you might want to prioritize killing them if so, unless you think you can kill the others in one turn each. Do they have armor? Do they just look buff? Then they might be a tank type sort of thing. Do they have like kind of an element theming to them? Do they carry a big, prominent, nasty looking weapon? Then they might do big damage. All of that can help you kind of guess about their threat level roll to a certain degree. You'll need to correct your assumptions mid-battle by watching what they do and all that. Then, a turn pass. You attack stuff, you take some damage, and every turn you reassess how much trouble you're in and which enemies need to die next. These questions, most people who play RPGs will instinctively think about them. It's like second nature. Threat assessment and target priority. It's something that we barely think about. It's just natural, invisible. It's the water that we're swimming in when we play turn-based combat. Now, let's set up some enemy archetypes to naturally interact with these thoughts. These will be the base building blocks of our turn-based encounters. We're going to set up 5 enemy archetypes. Most enemies can be easily categorized into these. As you add more components and complexity to your battle system, these archetypes get more complex too, but you can still use these as starting points. These archetypes all come down to the question, which of these enemies need to die next? The short-term goal of your party at any given point in a battle is to reduce the amount of threat the enemy group represents as much as possible, so you sustain as few wounds as possible during the fight, at as low a cost in resources possible, right? So let's begin. The enemy archetypes. Let's start with these nerds. The popcorn. They're low threat, low HP, and high priority. All right? The popcorn. Let's go. So popcorn, you might have, this is usually a term we use in shmups. In shmups, popcorn are just enemies that you kill in a single hit, right? I'm kind of stealing that terminology there because I feel like there's I feel like there's kind of something similar going on. So, popcorns are enemies that can be killed by a single average strength attack for an appropriate level party, and who are not a huge threat on their own. They may appear as a crowd or be summoned by other monsters. Most players understand that killing these enemies early is a good idea. Although they're not very dangerous individually, they're an easy way to quickly reduce the enemy group's threat at a minimal cost. So they're basically like the low-hanging fruit of the enemy party. A small mistake that you can make, like a minor mistake, is to, like as a player, is to dedicate a high damage party member to attack one of them, wasting their damage potential that could have been better spent on a higher threat enemy. If the player has access to a group damage attack, they may be able to kill the whole group of them with a single action, so that makes them particularly vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. These enemies are often themed as bugs, slimes, or little imps. Usually they have the smallest sprites of all the game's monsters. As a humanoid, it might look like a weak little soldier. So basically, they're the low-hanging fruit enemies. They're tempting to attack quickly to just diminish opposing numbers. A very good indicator that a player is under-leveled for an area is them struggling to kill popcorn-type enemies quickly. If you need to dedicate multiple actions per turn on each of these guys, you might be in trouble. A stronger enemy type being demoted to a popcorn later is also another satisfying sign to the player that they're getting stronger. Being able to kill all of them with one spell or one ability is also a good way to make a spellcaster type character feel powerful early on too. So that's the popcorn. Moving on. Second type, the cannon fodder. Mid threat, mid HP, mid priority. Cannon fodder enemies are the most common, basic kind. They're a bit more dangerous than popcorn on their own, and a single average strength attack usually won't be enough to kill them, putting them somewhere in the middle priority side. You need to concentrate a few attacks on them, or dedicate a high damage attack on them to take them down. This is where picking the right party member for the job is important. You don't want to waste a mid-strength attack on one before your higher strength damage character kills them in one blow anyway. Sometimes a weak attack character can be enough to finish off one of these guys. So these enemies are varied in theme. They're just about anything can be a cannon fodder type, but they shouldn't be too big or scary looking. As a humanoid, it'll be like a standard warrior or brigand or whatever. For a player, being able to reliably kill these enemies in a single action becomes a good sign that you're starting to get stronger. So that's when cannon fodder enemies get demoted down to popcorn. Yeah, these are the most common types. Now we have the glass cannons. High threat, low to mid HP, and highest priority. So glass cannons are the highest threat enemy you're facing, right? A lot of damage potential or general danger packed into a single creature makes it a very high value target. Usually, the glass cannon will have high enough HP that any single attack won't be enough to kill them. So you need concentrated fire on them, or using special skills or etc. to kill them in a single turn. This is typically the enemy you want to prevent from acting entirely if you can. It cannot die fast enough. Usually, they are the enemies that just have the highest attack power and this is the most common form it takes, or an enemy that has like a really nasty spell attack or something like that. But they can also be the biggest threat for other reasons. They might use a very disruptive status effect. They might summon other creatures. They might boost the strength of every other foe in the fight. The important part is they need to die yesterday. Theme-wise, these enemies often emphasize danger, or at least make their dangerous ability obvious. They might also make their fragility obvious too. They'll often appear as deadly animals like venomous spiders or scorpions if their threat is a nasty poison effect or something like that. Or something magical, or some guy with huge prominent weapon if it's just like a huge damage. And they'll tend to be a bit bigger than cannon fodder types visually. And as a humanoid, it's often going to be like a wizard or an assassin. So that's the glass cannon. And then we got the tank. The tank is any enemy that is impossible to take down in a single turn, but isn't so deadly that you still need to make it your priority. So, it's a low priority target because any attacks against it are essentially wasted for the time being, not reducing the enemy party's threat level and maximizing the damage you receive. So they're like a trap to attack them. If you have any means of disabling them with a status effect, this is often their weakness, giving you time to handle the higher priority targets without taking damage from them in the meantime. Tanks generally have big sprites emphasizing bulk or armor. As a humanoid, it'll be a heavily armored warrior wielding a shield, or a barbarian type with big muscles. And being able to kill a tank in a single turn is a great sign of the player's growing strength, demoting a tank down to being essentially like a cannon fodder enemy. So, yeah, tanks, it should usually take at least 2 turns of concentrating attacks to kill them, maybe even more than that. Yeah, point is, attacks on the tank are essentially wasted, and the enemy group still does the same damage every turn if you concentrate attack on the tanks, right? And then finally, we have the boss. That's obviously going to be the least common enemy type. It's a tank that is dangerous enough that you can't afford to leave it for last. and you need to concentrate fire on it to bring it down in as few turns as possible. This is the enemy that forces you to go all out and spend resources. Only a glass cannon will be a higher priority target than a boss because it's a higher threat that you can neutralize now instead of later. And bosses will, of course, have big, impressive, unique sprites. They'll often have various abilities that mess with the flow of battle. It might temporarily shift its threat up and down depending on the phase of combat. This is going to be like the weird, the more complicated enemies, of course, because it's an enemy that sort of like that guides the flow of a whole battle. Of course, whenever a boss enemy is there, that battle is about that boss enemy, right? So, yeah. So, there you go. So this is the most basic enemy archetypes if you remove every feature of combat and only have damage and HP left. This is the point here, is that like you can have a fairly complex like combat situations here with no gimmicks whatsoever, just by manipulating enemy damage and enemy HP. This is the fundamentals I'm talking about here. The building blocks. This is something you can start with. If you're going to be making enemy like monsters for an area, you can just start by making one of each of these, basically. And that's like a really good starting point to have already a bunch of enemies to play with. And combining all of these enemies together is going to inherently build different battles. Because you're going to need to prioritize differently based on which enemies are mixed together. So this is what I'm talking about as like this being the building blocks. As a starting point, before you even include all the other features, this is a really good foundation for combat design. Well, yes, so healing and buffing enemies, you could classify something like this as a glass cannon, yes. It's going to depend on... So healing is a bit there. I'm going to be talking about healing next time, actually, next section. Healing is a bit complicated. Healing is healing is very circumstantial, right? Healing is really nasty if there's like a tank or a boss alongside it. If you mostly kill things in a single turn anyway, healing doesn't really do much, right? So it's a kind of weird one. Healing is very circumstantial. Unless the healer can also revive enemies, then that's absolutely a glass cannon. It absolutely needs to die first. But so it's complicated a bit. All right. I'm going to take a little break here because I'm talking a lot and I don't want to hurt my throat again. Let's take a 1 minute break before I start talking about adding back those features that I took away earlier. Now we're going to talk about bringing them back in and how they affect all of these archetypes and all of your like threat assessment and target priority stuff. All right. I think when a boss kind of tricks you like this, like makes something obviously be the thing you have to attack, and then punishing you for doing it, I think that's fine depending on how it's executed, It's like there's like different ways to look at it. If you're punished for doing it, it might be more like killing the small one that makes the big one stronger, right? Might be kind of just a way, like another way to think about it is once the little guy is dead, it's sort of like phase 2 of the battle, I think that's fine. Like as long as that's kind of intended to be how it works, right? If you're literally punished like, oh no, that's the wrong strategy, that's a bit weirder. Like, oh, if you kill the small guy, like if you kill the small guy, you're dead. That was the mistake. You failed the puzzle. If it's that approach, that's a bit weirder. That feels like, okay, the game probably should have like given you a warning of some kind, you know? Like maybe the first time you attack the little guy, the big guy immediately gives you like a huge punishment as like a warning, right? Like you need like that's something that needs a bit more of a warning, I think. Or otherwise it's just like you're just kind of arbitrarily punishing the player, you know? Yeah. Well, I can imagine a very lazy dude. I can imagine a version of this where that's actually still the right thing to do because now the like unless like if the big guy now needs to choose between healing or damaging, it still only has like one action per turn, right? Then it's like okay, you like the big guy now gains the ability of the small guy, but they still lost one action. Yeah, the turn economy just shifted to your favor still, right? So I think that can still be like the right thing to do here. But yes, you just have to be careful about punishing the players arbitrarily for doing the right thing. But sometimes punishing the player is really just means it's the second phase of the fight and is just meant to like make you like panic, you know. Um, it's like think about like think about let's go to because again I can use look outside as examples look outside battles as examples because obviously most people watching here probably played look outside, so it's a good place to go for that. But like imagine if you thought of the hell ride fight, you know, like after you do enough damage to the hell ride it swallows you and now it's like the next phase of the fight, you know, like you could think of that as like you've been punished for killing it, but it's just the flow. It's just the intended flow of the battle, you know. So yeah, you have to be. It's all about exactly how it's executed. Um, and yeah, also yeah, like it can also just be a gimmick fight, like a trickster cut type thing where you're tricked into doing something that you're punished for, and then it's like I think that as long as a mistake isn't fatal, as long as a mistake isn't fatal, unless you've been really clearly warned about it, you know, that's the thing. Like you need to let the players learn. You need to let the players learn from their mistakes and then actually adapt, like you know, adapt to what they've learned. Um, another situation where like okay you fight a big guy and a small guy and killing the small guy is actually a trap. Another situation where it makes sense is if these are like random encounters and you fight them multiple times and it's like the first time you attack you kill the small guy first. Okay, you were tricked, like the game did like a nasty trick on you, fine. But then like you're going to encounter these guys again and the next time now you know what to do. And so at least you have an opportunity to, you know, you were tricked once, but like that wasn't like the end of the world. It wasn't like a boss battle, you know, one and done boss battle where, you know, you were just tricked, I guess. No, it's like, okay, now you know. Next time you encounter these guys, you know that these two have like a weird relationship you have to keep in mind, you know? All right. Let's go into healing. So, enemies healing one another is a great way to mess with players' priorities. Any enemy that has healing abilities will immediately climb in the player's shit list, regardless of what else is going on in the fight. A healing tank, depending on how good its healing is, might just become the party's top priority, despite how much effort it takes to take it down. So, like a tank that that gains a healing ability is arguably a boss, right? Yeah, a healing tank. I mean, that's not that uncommon in Archetype. Basically, clerics kind of are, or paladins. Um, However, if a player's concentrated attacks are enough to take down enemies in a single turn each, then a healer's abilities might be irrelevant. So this will be a judgment call for the player to make on the fly. They might first go for any enemy that they can kill over a single turn, and only then prioritize the healer. And naturally, if the player can disable the healer or blah blah with like status effects or other things, then that changes everything, right? So yeah, a healing enemy is actually kind of an interesting little interesting little quirk to bring. Um, you know, elemental damage. Damage types and damage elements are probably the simplest complexity layer to add on top of basic life and damage numbers. Damage resistance and weaknesses on enemies are kind of like a modifier on how quickly each of your party members can defeat each of them based on damage type matchups. That changes based on equipment and abilities. So a tank enemy that's weak to fire could become a cannon fodder type, because now you can suddenly kill them in a single turn if you just have the right setup. So yeah, it could go from something that's a low priority to being the first thing you take down in the fight. Because yeah, it adds a bit more complexity. It's no longer just about sheer damage values. Your weakest party member might be the strongest, or vice versa in certain circumstances, and elements force the players to react accordingly whenever this happens. It also rewards players for preparing carefully when they know they're about to face a threat with a specific strength or weakness. And careful equipment setups can ensure one crucial party member will reliably survive a devastating attack that an upcoming boss can use. Elemental damage, the way that I tend to think about it is that it's one big way to tie exploration into battles, right? Because generally you're going to get elemental resistance or damage from like exploring and finding stuff. I mean, obviously, exploration gives you like increases in equipment and everything, but it feels to me like elemental damage and elemental resists are one big way that like the places you've been to before and the items you've collected before gives you like this tool set that you can use to make some enemies, go from being super dangerous to trivial. Status ailments. So in some ways, status ailments value to a battle system can be pretty similar to the benefits of adding elemental damage, with resistances and weaknesses matching up, but with a little bit of extra. Ailments can bring a lot of chaos to a battle. Having some enemies afflict a party member at random during a fight forces you to adapt quickly. Can you wait it out? Or is it worth spending one action to heal the effect? Damage over time effects may not be an immediate threat, but over several turns can add up to a lot of extra healing burden. Having a character partially disabled, like having their spells silenced or their attacks blinded, will depend on circumstances. Having a party member fully disabled or charmed, on the other hand, can be a huge disaster that completely derails your combat strategy for a few turns, a 5-alarm fire that requires immediate response. Any of this can throw a wrench into the delicate machinery of your combat strategy, and it keeps you on your toes. Players having access to status effects can also mix up your own strategy. Again, like I said earlier, the ability to neutralize one enemy can completely change your priorities in combat. So yeah, status elements are a very good addition to stuff. And status buffs that can also adds a lot of dynamism to a battle. Of course, a caster that can buff its friends among the enemies becomes a higher priority for the player. But also, whichever enemy does get bolstered early in the fight might change its role as far as you're concerned. So a low priority enemy could become the biggest threat after it receives a big boost to attack. Another could become a tank from receiving, a shield or something. Buffs means that enemies can basically change roles mid-fight, and every encounter with this group can turn out a bit differently depending on a random target of that one enemy that buffs its friends. As for player buffs, of course, it adds more complexity to your action priority. You can spend actions to bolster your group instead of applying more damage pressure on enemies. Protection buffs will usually be worth it if you expect a battle of attrition, if your healers struggle to keep up with enemy damage, or if an incoming enemy attack risks killing some party members outright and you have no way to prevent it. Attack buffs will be worth it if you think that they will lead to some enemies dying earlier, or if you need help compensating for another enemy's healing or life regen abilities. Speed buffs can be great to make sure your party acts first in combat, so you may interrupt an enemy before it can act. So especially in situations where you tend to kill enemies in a single turn. This is when like speed changes become super important. So of course, depending on your game's design, like if your enemies tend to have a lot of HP, and if you don't usually kill enemies in a single turn, you know, how useful speed is kind of goes down. But also, of course, in ATB style games, then increased speed actually makes party members act more often, so that makes them very, very powerful. Yeah. So that's status buffs. And that's basically all like the little components of combat design. Now, I'm going to take another little break for my throat. And then I'm going to start designing some sample enemies. Using, just kind of like using these archetypes and mixing them up together just to make something, right? Just as an example of one approach you can make to just quickly design a bunch of enemies, right? All right, so let's design some enemies. Let's design a few sets of enemies just to kind of give an idea, right? So first, we are going to let's keep those archetypes. Let's keep those archetypes on the side here. And yeah, let's make a city dungeon for my game, for my workshop game here. Yeah, let's start. Okay, let's go with, okay, this is going to be like essentially the sewer area, right? Okay, so popcorn, rats, of course. Right? The rat is going to be a popcorn. Let's have like 2 different cannon fodders. Like maybe some sort of like what could be a good sewer cannon fodder enemy? Actually, maybe like a rat man. I'm not gonna worry right now about having sprites. An eel, sure, an eel. A gator man, I think that would maybe be like a tank. An eel. Yeah, maybe gator could be yeah. Okay, let's go with the glass cannon. What would be a good glass cannon that you find in a sewer? Yeah. Some sort of sewer rogue would be a glass cannon. Sure. And then what about a tank? What about the tank? What could be a good tank? Yeah, a big crocodile. Yeah. Sewer croc could be a tank. And a boss. Then what would be the boss? Now this is a boss type enemy, so it's not necessarily the boss at the end. It can also be like a mini boss, right? We're talking about enemy types here, not necessarily like, specifically like the area boss, but it could be. Yeah, a Grime Elemental. That might be good. A King Rat, of course. Yeah, Rat King. A Rat King's pretty good. Of course, a Rat King. Maybe it spawns a bunch of rats as its main thing. Okay, let's go into these a little bit more. So, the rat. So, okay. First, now, before we can actually give these guys stats, we're gonna need to kind of set up like a player, like a typical player strength here. Let's say this is a like level 1 kind of dungeon, right? Level 1, level 2 kind of dungeon. And let's say the player has 100 HP. Maybe the player does 20 damage. That's an average like player character. Does like 20 damage. Maybe has like, you know, maybe 20 of armor. And yeah, let's say just that for now. 100 HP, 20 damage, 20 armor. All right. And also, let's say that this is a game where, let's use sort of like the damage calculation that RPG Maker uses by default, or at least something like this. So RPG Maker, I think, has a pretty good way to calculate damage that I think works well for some making things easy to balance. In RPG Maker, how damage works is the damage you take is attack times 4 minus enemy defense times 2, right? So, attacker attack minus defender's defense x2. Right, now the reason it's said like this, now I usually change this a little bit. But the reason it works like this is that it means that if your attack is the same as your armor, if your armor is the same as the enemy attack, then the enemy attack is exactly the damage it's going to do to you, right? Yeah, I usually do this. I usually make it that it's attack x2 minus defense x1. It kind of comes down to the same, but it reduces the numbers. It makes the numbers go a little bit less crazy. So I kind of prefer attack x2 minus defense x1. But basically what it means is, like this, the reason it's useful is an enemy that has like 50 attack, attacking someone with 50 defense will do exactly 50 damage. So it's just really easy to balance. It's really easy to calculate in your head. So if your defense, if the armor you got so far is enough to equal the enemy attack, it's like you're going to get normal damage. And if your armor is a little weaker than the enemy attack, then you're getting more damage than usual. You know, the damage you're taking is higher than normal. So it makes it really easy to balance things out because this is like the reason it's set up that way. So yeah, because of this, we can kind of like work with like these numbers here. All right, so yeah. So basically this means that all the numbers, for like the stat numbers, are kind of equivalent. Attack and armor, or defense, attack and defense, are kind of equivalent numbers. And as long as the two match, if your defense match enemy attack, that means you're like at the correct level. It means like you're not under leveled. You have enough defense to deal with it. Right? Okay, so let's make the stats for the rat. So I want the rat. So okay. Actually, let's have a party. This is going to be a bit more complicated that way. This is going to be the player party. So you're going to have the warrior with 100 HP, 20 attack, 20 defense. You're going to have the rogue with like 60 HP. Let's use tabs. 60 HP, 30 attack, 10 defense. You're going to have the wizard with like 40 HP, 10 attack, 5 defense, but like with a spell that does, 20 damage to all, maybe. There you go. So let's say this is the party that we're trying to balance for here, right? Okay, so how would you define a popcorn enemy based on this? So you're going to have, the rat here, which is a popcorn. The idea of the popcorn is if the warrior, the one that has like sort of average attack, attacks it, usually it's going to kill it in a single turn, right? So HP, we're going to maybe give it like 15 HP. Or maybe we're even going to make it like 20. Yeah, like 20 HP. Attack is going to be like, say, 10. Yeah, maybe 10 attack. And let's say 10 defense. Okay? So this should result in something where the wizard cannot kill the rats in a single hit. But the warrior and the rogue can, right? So the wizard is sort of not meant to be using physical attacks. So when the wizard's doing physical attack, it's usually because you're hoping to like finish off something that almost died, right? So usually, the wizard attacks are going to be a bit of a waste, but the wizard might be able to kill a rat by attacking like twice. So over 2 turns, the wizard could finish off a rat. Or also like if there's a little bit of randomness to the damage, then a wizard could also finish off something that just almost died the previous turn, that kind of thing. All right, so this would be like the stat spread of a popcorn type. Now a cannon fodder type, we would want a cannon fodder type to either require an attack from combined actions of 2 party members or an attack from your dedicated high damage guy. So I would make a Ratman like the cannon fodder here, maybe 25 HP, with also maybe a bit more attack than the popcorns. So it's actually like if you can kill either of these in a single turn, the cannon fodder would be the one you kill first. And maybe like 10 defense as well. There you go. That would be like a good example of a cannon fodder. Now you might reduce the rat like this again, because if there's a little bit of randomness, you probably want the warrior to kill the popcorn type reliably. So you might want to have you might want to give it less HP than what the warrior needs to do. You might even go with like 10 HP since, with the defense, the wizard wouldn't be able to kill it in a single turn. But, it's up to you to like play with these and maybe, practice a bit. Now, the eel here would probably be sort of like, it's like an alternate cannon fodder. So maybe the eel does like a status effect. So we wouldn't want it to be too dangerous. But yeah, let's make it like... Yeah, maybe it does 30. Maybe it has 30 HP. And maybe it has a bit less attack, like 12 attack and 10 defense. Right? But maybe its attack has like a stun chance. Like attack 50% stun. So that would make, once you realize that this guy can stun you, you're actually, like, the player is going to realize, oh, wait, this guy's a bit nastier. This guy, maybe you kind of want to prioritize it over the Rat Man a bit. Then you have the Sewer Rogue. Okay, so Sewer Rogue, again, Glass Cannon. Glass Cannon, the idea is you need dedicated attacks on him. So you might want to have to combine everyone's attacks, or at least the warrior and the rogue, to kill it in a single turn. So you might want to give it 50 HP. And it needs to do scary damage. So let's make it do 30 attack. So not enough to kill the wizard in a single hit. All right. So just because you get unlucky and he attacks the wizard, that shouldn't like kill him. But this is enough damage to be like a threat, like a big threat. Yeah. And also, actually, that might be enough. Now that I think about it. Yeah. Since the attack is higher than the wizard's defense, that might actually be enough to kill him. Whoops. Let's see. Let's count it out. Right? So that would be 30 times 2. That's 60 minus 5. Yeah. So that would actually do 55 damage. So the wizard would actually die in a single hit from that. All right. Let's lower it down to 20 damage then. Yeah. So 20 damage. That would definitely not be enough to kill the wizard in one hit, but it would be close. And also, actually, random damage here, and also a crit would kill. But it's okay. If a crit has a chance to kill your characters, that's fine. To me, critical hits, I guess we didn't go into critical hits. To me, critical hits represent like a disaster that you have to deal with, you know? To me, this is like enemies doing critical hits. To me, this represents like an oh shit moment the player has to react to, you know? Oh, you didn't expect this guy to die, you know? Everything was going smoothly, but you got unlucky and now you have to adapt, right? This is the purpose of critical hits for enemies in my book. So I'm okay with balancing in such a way that, okay, if an enemy gets a crit, that could actually kill this guy in one hit. As long as it's not in a situation where a single person dying would give you a game over immediately, right? So, for instance, if this was still a solo game, if you don't have friends with you, then of course you want to stay away from that. You know, it needs to be like a pretty, no permadeath, stuff like this. If there's permadeath, then you would need to have a way to prevent this in some way. You would need to have a way to like protect your weaker characters. Maybe like, maybe a character can be protected. Maybe the warrior has like an ability to protect another character. Stuff like this, right? Yeah. You need to prevent the idea of a critical hit being something to just sort of force the player to adapt really only makes sense if the player can adapt. Now, of course, if there's permadeath, maybe your idea of the player adapting is more like adapting to losing and losing party members unexpectedly. So in that sense, it can make sense. But still, I would be more careful about this sort of thing. And then let's go, with 10 defense. So in this case, I'm just giving 10 defense to everybody. I'm just giving 10 defense. Also, you could also have attack gives 50% poison. That's going to make the sewer rogue even more nasty. Not really necessary here. But here you can see just very small changes in stats is enough to give these guys like a dynamic. That's kind of the main point that I'm talking about here. Is you really don't need RPG mechanics are already kind of built in to form fun dynamics. Now let's do the tank. So the sewer croc. Let's give the sewer croc enough. So the idea of the tank is you cannot kill a tank in a single turn, even if you combine attacks, right? So it needs to definitely have more than 60 HP. So let's give him like 80 HP, the tank. The attack should be... how much attack should you have? So the tank, I think, can be about on even ground with a cannon fodder type enemy, or could be just a little bit nastier. But not by much, right? Because if you make it too dangerous, then it needs to die. Like, the tank is meant to be a trap, right? The tank is meant to be a thing where if you attack this guy first, it's a mistake, right? Like, there needs to be bad decisions. You know, you kind of have to set things up that there are bad decisions, or else, strategy doesn't really have a point, right? So this is like a trap to attack first, unless, of course, you have certain tools. So let's not give its attack too high. Let's just make it just a bit higher than the Ratman. Just 16 attack, and maybe we can like reduce the Ratman attack to 14 here. Right? Yeah, 16 attack. And how about 15 defense? So slightly higher defense. So this means... So what happens if the wizard tried attacking? If the wizard tries attacking the sewer croc, he's going to do 5 damage to him. So that's going to be a good way to like really, really indicate that the sewer croc is like, you know, is a tank. Is that like you're going to noticeably do less damage to him. So yeah, if the wizard, again, what's really fun about the way the math works here is you absolutely just can mentally calculate the outcome of attacks here because it's really simple. So yeah, attacking the sewer croc with the wizard, so 10 attack to 15 defense. So its attack is doubled, so 20 attack minus defense, so yeah, 5 damage. So doing 5 damage would feel really piddly here. If the rogue attacks the sewer croc, that would be, so 60 attack minus 15, so that would do 45 damage to the sewer croc. Which is just over half, so that means the rogue could kill the sewer croc in just 2 turns. Is that something we're okay with? Maybe we need to boost this up to 100. If the rogue here can actually kill that in just 2 turns, And also if the warrior attacks, warrior is 20 attack minus 15 def, so that's 40 damage minus 15. So, you know, it's not too bad. That would be like 25 damage, so we could kill it. So the warrior could kill the sewer croc on average in 4 turns. That's okay. And that means the 2 together could take down, if you like really focus attacks with these 2 on the sewer crocs, it would take like 2 to 3 turns. I think that's doable. Now, let's look a little bit at how deadly is this set of enemies. Maybe this is kind of too deadly right now. We've only been looking at how quickly we can kill the enemies, not really at how quickly the enemies can kill us. So we might need to adjust the attack numbers here, right? So, how quickly can the glass cannon, for instance, we did kind of look at this before, that the glass cannon can kind of kill the wizard like fairly quickly, right? We might need to tweak this down a little bit. Like maybe the rat, maybe the popcorn here, the rat, maybe we lowered this down to like 8, right? And maybe the eel does 10. Maybe the ratman does 12. And the glass cannon, maybe it's more like 18. You know, there's room to like play around with these numbers a little bit. Because you have to calculate, okay, how many turns should it take for enemies? Also, if enemies can concentrate attacks on one target, can they kill that target really quickly? That's another thing to think about. And now also let's look at the boss. So the boss is meant to be... The boss is meant to be, of course, basically a tank that is too dangerous to leave for later. So I would say a rat king, the reason it's too dangerous, it would be that the rat king keeps spawning rats. So obviously things go rapidly out of hand, right? So first, yeah, it needs to be tough enough that you can't kill it super quickly. You need to deal with whatever its gimmick is for a few turns at least. So let's go with like 120 HP. So just a little bit more than the tank here. And for damage, I think it could do like just a little bit more than the tank. And for defense, maybe just 12. So it doesn't feel like as much of a waste if you attack with the wizard, you know? Yeah, there you go. Something like that. And spawns 1 rat per turn. That's pretty nasty. That's a pretty nasty boss right there. Okay, now let's think about how we can combine these enemies. The different kinds of like battle dynamics we can make with just these like tools, right? So first, ways to combine things, right? You can have just a big group of popcorn, a big group of popcorn, or like a single cannon fodder, pair of cannon fodder, um, single glass cannon, single tank, and single boss if the boss is like a mini boss type that appears repeatedly and not just literally a boss at the end. So I could think of these and like simpler. Also, another thing is like say glass cannon and cannon fodder, right? Or so like small combinations of things or single, like just one enemy at a time. I think of those as like the tutorial encounters that are meant to sort of introduce you to like each of these enemies, right? And then you can start combining them more. And now that's when the player needs to like figure out who needs to die first, right? So okay, let's make some sample encounters here. So first we're gonna just have like say like 2 rats plus Ratman, right? So 2 rats plus Ratman. You kind of want to kill the 2 rats first, and then you take down the Ratman after. Because the 2 rats, they're kind of they're low hanging fruit. You can kill them quickly. Ratman needs a little bit more concentrated fire to kill, so that would be like the easiest way to get through this without taking too much damage. You of course have 2 rats plus eel. You can have just Ratman and eel, which this would actually, like, both of these are pretty close in threat, but the eel can stun, and once you realize the eel can stun, you'll realize, oh wait, the eel needs to die first, right? So there's a little bit of a learning curve to this. Let's go with Sewer Rogue plus Ratman plus 2 rats. That would be like, this would be sort of like deeper in the dungeon. You have a Sewer Rogue, a Ratman, and 2 rats. Now, so think about this. What's the priority here, right? Sewer Rogue is the most dangerous. Right away it needs to die. After this, you go for the 2 rats and then the Ratman. You add a tank to the thing. Of course, also you do have the you'd have the wizard here with a spell that can do 20 damage to all, and that's probably something you should consider for whenever there's a lot of rats. You can have like a tank with 4 rats, and that would be like the best situation to start using like a nuke spell, like to just get rid of the rats as soon as possible, because they just represent so much damage, right? That it's really worth spending the resources to just get rid of them immediately. And then you take on the tank. You can have like, yeah, so you can see how these, like, combining these works quite a bit. And then of course the actual Rat King fight, what I would do is Rat King plus, I would say Rat King plus 2 Ratman would be a pretty good setup for this. So like right at the start, you might, if at this point you've grown strong enough, you might want to like use your rogue to actually take down the Ratman, while the others focus on the Rat King to like just keep the damage going on the Rat King so it doesn't take too long to kill him. But in the meantime, you still want to sort of like, temporarily, you want to keep making progress on the boss while you also kind of reduce the amount of damage. Because that's one thing about bosses. Bosses and tanks, sort of like, it's like bosses and tanks, they apply pressure on you as you deal with everything else, right? tanks like, yeah, they apply pressure on you while you deal with everything else. It's almost like tanks are almost like a timer on your battle, you know? Tanks are like attacks that every turn you spend while the tank is there, every turn that you spend, you have to pay like a life tax. And you need to kill everything else as fast as possible before you can take on the tank, you know? And bosses can be a little bit like that too. So yeah, a Rat King with 2 Ratman. Also, another thing you could do is a Rat King, a Ratman, and a Sewer Rogue. That way it's more like, okay, as soon as it begins, take out the Sewer Rogue immediately, then the Ratman, and then the Rat King. But also, in the meantime, you maybe continuously do... maybe whenever the Rat King has like 2... Maybe you wait for the another strategy here could be you wait for the Rat King to have summoned at least 2 or 3 rats. So once there's 3 rats, that's when you use the spell from the wizard to just get rid of all of them, without like spending resources every single turn. Another fun thing about a boss, because if the boss encounter is pretty late in the thing, by the time you reach the boss, you might have your characters might have grown enough that their relationship to these enemies changes, right? So that's another thing that's fun about having kind of keeping the numbers close like this, like making sure that like your cannon fodders. You usually can't with the wizard. You can't kill a cannon fodder in a single turn with like your basic warrior. But it's close. So because of this, as soon as you get like a weapon upgrade in that dungeon, as soon as you get a weapon upgrade or maybe just a level, suddenly it's going to be enough that now the warrior can kill a cannon fodder in a single hit, right? So keeping the numbers close like this, keeping it that it's just so, is a really good way of making like finding weapons and leveling up feel really satisfying, because you're going to be just enough to get past that threshold, and it has like a big impact on the battles of the area. So this is one good reason it's really a good idea to sort of keep the numbers close like this, so you get as much impact as possible when it happens. Okay, now, let's have the deep sewers. All right, deep sewers. Okay, now we're no longer working from like a blank sheet here, because the deep sewers, okay, now at this point it's like a level 2 dungeon. And let's say at this point, the warriors like 220, the rogues maybe 80, and the wizards 50 or something. And maybe, say, the rogue increased attack to this, and maybe wizard increased attack just a little bit. And warrior might have increased defense a little. Rogue increased defense a little. And the wizard barely increased it. And maybe the wizard spell is a bit stronger now. All right. So let's say this is the growth of the characters once they reach the deep sewers. So let's design some more enemies. But now, we can think in mind, okay, we can bring some new enemies, but also, we have to keep in mind, we have some existing designs here. And those existing designs are useful, This is where, palette swaps become useful. Because palette swaps kind of let the player recycle information they remember from a previous level into this new situation. So now when they find a palette swapped, sewer rogue, they can kind of presume, well, this guy might be pretty similar to the first one. So they're not starting from nothing. So, okay. So let's say one thing we'll do is, for the deep sewers, we bring back the Ratman. We don't even make it a color clone. We just bring back the Ratman, but now the Ratman is used as a popcorn. Now, we could also change its color. We could also make it a color clone, but I think keeping this guy but changing his purpose is a good way to really show the player that, oh, you know, you can kill these guys massively now, right? Like now the wizard spell can actually kill the rat man in a single hit, right? Let's go. Let's make some new cannon fodders. So, okay, new cannon fodder. Let's say, what would be a new cannon fodder? Like a sewer octopus. There you go, new cannon fodder. Sewer octopus. Another new cannon fodder. Maybe like a slime monster. Like a big slime monster. Let's bring in another glass cannon. And let's say this one is going to be a color clone, of a palette swap of the sewer rogue. This one was going to be like an assassin. Right? An assassin. And let's go with, okay, for the tank, let's see, what could be a new tank? Oh, yeah. What could be the new tank? Yeah, gelatinous cube could be a good tank. Sure. A big turtle? Yeah. Yeah, giant turtle. And then the boss. What could be the boss? A muck golem could be a good boss. Sure. Maybe the muck golem is kind of tied to the slime here, so maybe these are like mucklings. There you go. Mucklings. Okay, let's give these some stats. So, we're recycling the rat man, because now the rat man has sort of been demoted to a popcorn. Now, sewer octopus. Okay, so again, let's just use the same math here. Let's say sewer octopus. So again, this is a cannon fodder. So the cannon fodder is meant to die in a single hit to your high damage dealer guy. And otherwise, maybe to combine attacks from the others. So let's give you like 35 HP. And let's go for, okay, what we do for attack. Let's make you like 16 attack. And let's go for like 15 defense. Actually, 20 defense. Yeah, 20 defense. Or actually, maybe, how about 25 defense? Yeah, let's go with 25 defense. Basically matching the average attack. All right. And over here. So the mucklings. This is going to be sort of like, maybe this one's going to have like 40 HP. And so this one's going to be a bit, slightly more dangerous than the sewer octopus. Let's go for like maybe a bit less attack, just a tiny bit less. But he's gonna have a special thing. Maybe the mucklings regenerate their health? Maybe they do slow. Maybe like 100% slow on hit. Or maybe blind. Maybe 50% blind on hit. That's good. And maybe they're weak to fire. Sure. Okay, and the assassin? So this assassin is a recolored palette swap of the sewer rogue. There you go. And so this guy, let's say, yeah. So again, we want high enough damage that you need to combine strength to kill it in a single turn. So let's give you like 60 HP. And let's give him 30 attack. And 30 attack is pretty dangerous there, though. Here it kills the wizard in one hit. Actually, no, it wouldn't. It would just be close. Yeah. No, it would. It would kill the wizard in one hit. Whoops. All right, maybe more like 25 attack then. 25 attack. Yeah, the wizard should survive this. And 25 defense. And maybe 100% poison on hit. Or maybe a nastier poison. Or maybe I would remove the poison from this one. Yeah. This one just does high damage. And this one does the poison. There you go. That's pretty nasty. Now, giant turtle. Now we have the tank. So the tank again. We want it to have enough HP that it survives like a full combined turn of attacks. So let's make it like 150 HP. And let's give it just a bit more attack than these guys. So like 18 attack. And maybe even 20 attack. Yeah, 20 attack. Not sure. And for defense, let's go with 40 defense. Sure. 40 defense. So at this point, the wizard attacking the giant turtle is going to do nothing. Nothing at all. I think the Muck Golem boss. So what is the Muck Golem going to do? Let's give the Muck Golem 120 HP, maybe 200 HP. Attack. Maybe 20 attack, and maybe the giant turtle. Just, yeah, 18 attack. And defense is going to be like 30, maybe 25 defense. There you go. And so what should be the gimmick? What should that boss do? How about that boss has a stunning attack that it does every like 3 turns? Yeah, a stun attack performed every 3 turns. Yeah. I mean, like I said, the tank... One of the things the tank does is sort of give like a timer to your fight, right? Like it just gives pressure. And yeah, small damage to everyone, That's exactly that sounds like exactly the right thing, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's basically putting pressure on the party. You need to finish this fight quickly. Or if you can, neutralize the tank with like a with some sort of stun or anything like that. Um, Stun attack performed every 3 turns seems pretty good. And yeah, maybe we do this, or maybe the giant turtle could do every other turn splash, like water splash, which would be like 10 damage to all or something. Sure, something like that. That could work. Yeah, there you go. That works. And now we can think of different combinations. Again, you can have like a few early combinations that are just kind of meant to teach you about the different characters. So, like, for Ratman, Sewer Octopus +2 Ratman, Muckling +2 Ratman, Sewer Octopus plus Muckling, Assassin plus 2 Muckling. You can just combine them like these. The whole point here at first is kind of teaching you about these characters, about these monsters, and how they combine. Giant turtle plus assassin plus sewer octopus plus 2 Ratman. That'd be a big fight. It'd be a big, nasty fight, almost like a mini boss. And then the actual Muck Golem, let's go with Muck Golem plus 3 Muckman. That could be nasty. 3 Muckman? Yeah. That could be pretty nasty. Maybe 2 Muckman. That might be like, you have to be careful about like the sheer amount of damage that's coming in every turn. Well, spells are a little bit factored. I'm mostly just thinking of spells here in terms of... oh, yeah, Muckling, yes. Yes, Muckling. Yeah, here I'm kind of mostly thinking of spells in terms of like, a wizard's ability to like take care of a bunch of popcorn at once. So that's just like, I'm just giving one spell here to the wizard for this. Now, one good thing to look over is, okay, in these encounters, how much damage is coming in the first turn? Let's simulate fighting 1 assassin and 2 mucklings. The first turn of this, how this would go, right? So we have 1 assassin and 1 muckling. Okay, so who do you fight first? You want to take down the assassin. Hopefully before it acts its first turn. Depending on the speed, it might still have its first attack. That could be bad news. So you want to kill the assassin ASAP here. Yeah. Opening with it's just really satisfying. It's the reason the popcorn are there. It just like in shmups, popcorn are there so that you attack something and it pops up. It blows up when you hit it. That's what they're there for. It makes your party feel strong even when you're level appropriate, Yeah. And also it kind of gives a little bit of a attacks on your wizards like magic at the start as well. Kind of forces your wizard to do this on the first turn instead of like whatever other thing it could do. So it kind of like kind of messes with your action economy a little bit on the first turn. There's a bunch of little things that does to a fight to just kind of make it very obvious that the wizard should open with this move, right? Yeah. Or at least makes you wonder, okay, wait, is it still worth it to do the buff first? Yeah. Anything that affects decision making is good. anything that affects decision making, that like, okay, adding this changes the calculus here of what the player should do, it's a good addition in my book. All right, so yeah, let's simulate here. Yeah, attacking, yeah, fighting, yeah, assassin and 2 mucklings. So, how much damage is coming our way if we don't do anything on the first turn, right? Assassin does 25 damage, muckling do 15 damage each. That could be a lot. So together, they're going to do like 30 damage. They could do up to 30 damage. If they all attack the wizard right at the start, you could be kind of screwed. But that's just how it goes sometimes. Now, if you combine attacks and kill the assassin first thing, at least you can get rid of that nasty 25 damage coming. And again, depending on turn order, this might also affect things. If you know the assassin always acts first, that makes things a little different. Like, you know you're taking that damage no matter what. So you might, for instance, decide to make your wizard block. If you know the assassin's always going to attack, there's a chance your wizard just dies if they take a hit. So you might actually want to make your wizard block on the first turn. And have warrior and rogue. Yeah, have the warrior and rogue team up on the assassin on turn 1. And then you're still taking 15 damage twice, which should not be able to kill the wizard, I think. I mean, that would be 30 minus 7. So that would actually be enough. The wizards, all right, again here, you know, these numbers are a little rough. Maybe this is not enough HP for the wizard to have at this point. That, like, you know, two attacks from like a cannon fodder is enough to kill him. You know, maybe the wizard needs a little bit more defense here. Maybe a little bit more HP. You know, this might be just a little bit too close for comfort. You know, that might be a good little hint that, okay, wizard needs a little more HP here. Yeah, just think about the amount of damage someone's going to take if just 2 cannon fodder attacks them. Is it enough to kill them? That might be dangerous, right? Yeah, see, it's not too bad. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going now for one last session. One last sewer level here. Deepest Sewers. It's a level 3 dungeon. I mean, it probably wouldn't be level 3. It would be like, you know, level 5 or something. And now, okay, let's keep growing the characters here. Let's say at this point the wizard has like 150, rogue is 100, and wizard has 80 HP. Right? Seems about right. And at this point, maybe the warrior does 30 attack. Maybe the rogue does like 45. And the wizard does 20. And let's say at this point it's got 30. 30 and 20. Maybe more like 25 here. And maybe at this point the spell does like 40 damage to all. So in Malison things are a little different. In Malison and also in Look Outside, I tend to have a lot of one-on-one battles. This is the tricky thing, especially in Malison. In Malison, there's also less control over what enemies are fought. Because Malison is kind of like in between a JRPG and a CRPG, right? And depending on how exactly you start a fight, you can like pull enemies to fight them one by one in Malison. And that really, like, I can't, like, in some boss battles and some contexts, I can have specific, like, encounter setups. But in Malison in general, fights tend to be almost like on the player's terms. Because, yeah, like, you can run and you can have just one. If there's, like, a group of enemies, you can just sometimes fight one at a time. So that kind of complicates this. Yeah, this is one thing that makes Malison a bit more like a CRPG. So this is also why, yeah, like a lot of this is really more like JRPG stuff, because JRPG tends to be more specific battle encounters set up with like a specific group. Look Outside is a lot closer to this, but also in Look Outside is also like kind of survival horror, and because of this, in Look Outside, a lot of the balance is more about resource management stuff. So that also affects things. When you have a lot of resource management, it's more about the cost of your actions a bit. While here, I mean, in a regular RPG, there's still the resource management is all about like how much damage you're taking, and this is why like reducing the enemy threat as quickly as possible is super important, because it's all about your HP, right? But in something like Look Outside, this is where you're moving a little further away from the core of JRPGs, because now there's a bunch of different things that have value. And you're not always using like your best possible move, because your best possible move might be a weapon that's going to break and all that. So the calculus, the constant calculus of the player in a game that has a survival horror side to it is a little different. This stuff is still useful for that, but it's only really useful for like moments where I know the player can go all out, sort of. That's when I get the closest to designing things this way, is when I know the player can go all out. When I know the player is like has their back against the wall and has to just act optimally. But otherwise, it's kind of like I need to expect the player to not act optimally in order to save on resources. And that's the big complicating factor for Look Outside and also for Malison. But for Malison, it's even more complicated because, like I said, in Malison, you know, the player almost chooses the battles in a weird way. Yeah. All right, so yeah, let's do the next phase here. So okay, so this is the new set. Now let's bring back the Sewer Croc as a new tank. And actually, at this point, let's see. Would the Sewer Croc... Could I bring the Sewer Croc as a cannon fodder? No, the Sewer Croc has just a little too much HP to be a good cannon fodder. Well, actually, no, that would good. Yes, the Sewer Croc could be a cannon fodder if I just bring it back as is. Yeah, the Sewer Croc can now be a cannon fodder. Look at that. And then I could have a recolor of the Sewer Croc as a tank. And this would be like a Dire Croc or something. Or maybe a King Croc. A King Croc. And it's going to have like 200 HP, 30 defense, and let's say 30 attack. Yeah. Okay. What's going to be the popcorn? Let's make a new thing for a popcorn here. So what would be a new popcorn type? A mushroom? Yeah, sure. A little myconid. Fish with legs, that's fun too. Leg fish, that's fun. Although I like mushrooms. Why not both? Why not mushroom as a popcorn and fish with legs as an alternate cannon fodder? Yeah, mushroom, popcorn, and let's have this. So again, should be able to kill pretty reliably. by a warrior. So let's give you 30 HP. Maybe even 25 HP. Yeah. No, yeah, 30 HP for you. So the thing about giving someone exactly the popcorn, exactly as much as the attack of like the warrior, the thing this does is it means that at the start, at the very start of the dungeon, when the stats are like just right, occasionally the warrior is gonna fail to kill a popcorn, right? Because of like the random part of combat of damage. But as soon as the warrior levels up and the attack goes up a little bit, then suddenly it's going to be like a reliable kill. And that's going to be something felt too. So that's one good thing to do about like having the numbers really close like this. Because that really makes you see the improvements. So yeah, 30 HP, that'd be good for this. And then for attack, let's go for 25 attack and 30 defense. Sure. Now, for the cannon fodder, let's go for 45 HP. Let's go for 40 attack. Actually, no, let's go for 30 attack and 30 defense. There you go. Then the sewer croc, we just keep, this is just a returning enemy. And now, yeah, now that's a really good feeling. When something that used to be a tank comes back and is now something you can kill in one turn, that feels good. You really see that growth. You really see your character grow that way. Now let's have a new let's have something completely new here for a glass cannon. Let's see, what could be a good glass cannon here? How about some sort of sewer wizard? Yeah, there you go. A sewer wizard. A sludge fairy. Yeah, sludge fairy. A sludge fairy. Okay, now, sludge fairy, again, we want to make sure that you need to do concentrated attacks to kill it in one turn. So let's combine all of these here into like, let's say 80 HP. Yeah, 80 HP. And let's see, 50 attack and 30 defense. Yeah. 80 HP, 50 attack, 30 defense. Now the King Croc. Let's give him just a bit more attack than this. Let's go for 35 attack. 30 defense. Actually, let's go for 40. 40 defense. Maybe even 45. Yeah, matching the defense of the tank to the attack of your like main damage dealer, I think is a good idea. That really makes it feel like a tank that way. And okay, now let's do the boss. Let's do the boss. What could be a good boss? Let's see. This would be like the final boss of the area, you know, the big final boss at the very end here. What could it be? The sewer hydra. The sewage hydra. And the sewage hydra, we're gonna, no, this is gonna be 300 HP. It's gonna have like 40 attack, 30 defense. And actually, no, you know what? It's gonna have just 35. Actually, just 30 attack. But it's going to multi-attack. Yeah. Attacks 4 times. That's pretty nasty. That is pretty nasty. 3, yeah, you know, 3. Let's go for 3. Well, if it attacks multiple times like this. There you go. All right, and now let's come up with some enemy groups. I don't know. I mean, this is the kind of thing you need to test out. One big problem, of course, with this is if it attacks the wizard twice, at least twice, it might just kill the wizard right there. So that's something to worry about again. Think about this. Maybe, you know, again, this is the kind of thing you need to just test out a bit. You need to make sure a single turn just targeting the wrong guy doesn't just, you know, remove that completely. Yeah, Sewage Hydra attacks 3 times. Maybe it attacks 2 times. That'd be a bit easier to survive. Fish Person Centaurs. Isn't that a thing? Fish Person Centaur? Isn't that like one of the astrological signs? No, like a centaur with like fish parts. I feel like that's a, yeah. Isn't that what? Yeah, is that what Capricorn is? I remember like one of the astrological signs is that. I don't know. Maybe. All right, but yeah, there you go. You know, maybe a status effect wouldn't go amiss here. How about the Sludge Fairy has a spell that spell 50% 20 damage plus 50% chance to poison all. That's pretty nasty. That's pretty nasty. I would want the Sludge Fairy to be dead quickly. Attacks 2 times for the Sewage Hydra. Actually, you know what? I think for a Hydra, I would just lower the damage further to like 20. No, the damage. I would lower the damage further to like 20, but it attacks 4 times. Yeah. There you go. I think that's better. That would feel more like a Hydra that way, right? Also, attacks have 30% chance to poison. That's good. You'd probably find some poison resist gear in that dungeon. That would be a good way to reward exploration. Like, you find this and that makes a huge difference on You know, that would make poison resist gear like a very valuable treasure for here. So that's a great time to actually put it somewhere to really reward exploration. And also, you know, finding antidotes would also be very high value here. Yeah, this is another thing that status effects do is it just brings up the value of some gear and makes it really good when you find it. So that's one other good reason to include status effects. Okay, let's go with yeah. Let's make some groups. So maybe you know what? Let's have an alternate boss here. Let's have like a giant mushroom as an alternate boss. Yeah, that'd be fun. And let's give it like 500 HP. Also, let's make the mushroom like weak to fire. That might make sense. 500 HP. 40 attack. 20 defense. So you do a lot of damage to it. Like you would notice your characters do a lot of damage to it. So it's it's big numbers and also weak to fire. So what's fun about this here, and this is another thing that, you know, damage resistances and weaknesses can help you do, is you can kind of make... This is sort of an alternate type of boss here. This is almost kind of like a puzzle boss. Right? Like, this is a boss that has a sort of built-in solution to it. You know? Like... This is the boss that if you bring some fire damage to it, you just wreck it, right? So that can be kind of a fun thing to put in too. Like these puzzle bosses, you can think of it as like another enemy archetype almost. This is like something that is built in with a weakness, and where like you would put that weakness somewhere in the level, almost like, you know, the weakness you can find is like a key, and that door is that boss is the lock. And like literally just, you know, to kill this boss, go get that item first, and that boss is easy, right? And stuff like this is really fun. It's like it's really fun to like mix in with other stuff. Just build like setting up, building in some weaknesses that you're meant to use. Yeah. Exactly. You can have this boss then drop some poison gear. Let's see. What should that giant mushroom do? So maybe like it has a spore attack that like stuns. Spore attack. Maybe 30% chance to stun all. And maybe it keeps growing. Maybe it doesn't attack. Attack, no damage, but 30% chance to stun all. And grows mushrooms. Grows one mushroom every turn. So the damage, its damage is all comes from mushrooms, right? And otherwise it just stuns you and grows mushrooms. That's a fun little boss dynamic. So let's build some encounters. So let's build a giant mushroom. So it would be a giant mushroom plus 4 mushrooms. That'd be pretty good. There you go. That's an encounter. And also you have just like maybe 3 mushrooms. That would be 1 encounter. You could have 2 fish with legs. Maybe sludge fairy plus 2 mushrooms. Sludge fairy plus fish with legs. Plus king croc. Maybe 2 sewer Croc plus King Croc. You know, all these combinations have all sorts of different little dynamics building. And then the Sewage Hydra plus 2 times Sewer Croc. Or maybe plus 2 fish with legs. Yeah, something like that. Or maybe you can have fish with legs and Sludge Fairy. That'd be pretty nasty. That would be pretty nasty. That means the Sewage Hydra attacks a bunch of times. The Sludge Fairy attacks everyone and also may poison. That's 2 different sources of poison. That would be nasty. The fish with legs would really not be competing here. The fish with legs, maybe 2 fish with legs here. Ooh. Yeah, that would be pretty nasty. That would be a lot. That could be a party wipe. Again, that's where you go through the damage here and tweak a little bit. Now, what are other things you can do to help kind of tweak bosses? So I didn't really go into boss designs too much here. I didn't go too much into boss designs. I do have something prepared for like a boss design talk later. Because bosses are a little different, obviously, than like regular, like bosses can have all sorts of gimmicks, and there's a lot of ways to really make them stand out. And some of the easy ways you can make a boss stand out is just give them single-use abilities that are just meant to like make the player panic or meant to put the player in like a situation at the start or at the middle of the fight. So you don't need, when it comes to bosses, you don't just need to think about moves that are used repeatedly, Yeah, think also of moves that happen just once. Because moves that happen just once are just like, you think of moves that happen just once as like a disaster. A disaster happens in this fight. Maybe the disaster happens at the start, right? Maybe the disaster happens halfway through. Maybe the disaster, and this one's really useful, maybe the disaster happens like just before the boss dies, when the boss is on his last legs, Like there's 2 more turns left to that boss. That's a great time for a disaster to happen, to like make the player freak out, right? Those can be really, really useful. I really recommend thinking about single-use moves, because single-use moves are way easier to balance out. You don't really need to balance them out. It's just something you have to like put up. And it's something that can mess up the player's setup, that can mess up the player's strategy, that can like make a fight that seems like it's going well suddenly feel like it's all collapsing. It's great. I really recommend thinking about bosses, not just in terms of regular sort of repeated attack patterns and stuff, but also think about single things that can happen during the fight to change things up. Like just something like, okay, 50% chance to confuse all your party members, Stuff like that. Suddenly like just throwing a wrench in the works of your strategy. And now you have to panic and react to this. That stuff is really good. Thanks for the gifted sub, Empoli. Nice. That's 5. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Party wide debuff. Stuff like this can be really, really fun. Something also you can think of like these single use abilities as a way to like almost like a pacing tool for your fight, right? I mean, you can also use like phases of a boss for as a pacing tool, but like okay, here's a really fun thing that I remember Final Fantasy VI in its final boss fight does something really fun that like you should like take that as an example of what to do, but what single move, you know? Um like what single moves, like single use moves can do for a fight. I don't if any of you played Final Fantasy VI and beat it. The final boss does something really fun. I'm not going to spoil too much because it's one of the best games ever made, I think. But the final boss uses a move, and what it does is it sets your entire party's life to 1. Now, that move is fucking scary. And this is how the fight opens. Also, this is not actually. This is the final phase of the final boss. So there's a bunch of phases. You've just been through a bunch of battles, and you're probably, your resources might be starting to wear thin. And then the final phase happens, and then it does a move that sets everyone's HP to 1. Now, that is fucked up. And of course, when this happens, you have no idea that this is not like a move it can just pull at any time, right? You have no idea. But yes, it only does this once, as far as I know. Maybe it happens again later. I'm pretty sure the final boss, the final phase of the final boss of Final Fantasy VI, does this exactly once at the start of the fight. It sets everyone's HP to 1, and it is set up, its AI is set up that it doesn't follow this up immediately. It gives you like a full turn to come back from this, right? It waits like a full turn, and then when it moves next, it's always just a regular attack. It's always just a regular stab, basically. So it can't follow it up with like another group attack or anything. So there's no, unless the player literally can't heal at all, and at this point the player should be able to heal. This is literally the final fight, right? There's no actual threat. Like, it's almost like a cutscene when you think about it, right? Like, there's no actual risk that this kills you. There isn't even really like a decision to make. It's just a fight that starts with a dramatic gut punch, right? That's all it does. It's literally just a tone setter. This is a fight that right at the start tells you you're in trouble and just forces you to be in trouble, right? So there you go. So think about these single-use moves as not just something you have to like balance for the whole fight. Think of it as like a toolbox too. Like you can use this to do all sorts of stuff to mess with the tone and the pacing of a fight. Yeah, it's literally a built-in oh shit moment. Like it's there to make sure that even if you're overpowered for a moment, you feel like you're on the verge of dying, you know? And that's great. It works really, really well for that. It's entirely fake. It's like fake danger. You're not actually at risk of dying, but for a moment, you feel so vulnerable. Like if the boss could follow this up with, with any sort of group attack, or if it could immediately follow it up with like an attack, like you would lose your characters like immediately. There'd be nothing you could do about it, right? And yeah, stuff like this, That's absolutely part of your toolbox if you want to make like a dramatic moment in a fight. Yeah. Yeah, so um I hope this was useful. I hope this was useful. Just kind of giving you a little bit of an example of what it's like to just make a bunch of enemies. And I think I also hope that I've kind of demonstrated how, those archetypes, they're kind of oversimplifying things a bit, but they kind of make it easy. Like the whole point of them is that it's a model that makes it really easy to design a bunch of enemies quickly because it just gives you like a starting point. It gives them like a role right away. And then when you already have a role in mind, it's a lot easier to come up with stuff. It makes it that you're not working from a blank sheet of paper. You have a little structure to build an idea around, and ideas are much easier to come to you when you have like something to work from, right? And yeah, of course, they can have subtypes, and a lot of those subtypes of those archetypes are going to depend more on like the specific rules and features of your game, right? So that's going to be more dependent on your specific game. But I was sort of really starting from the base here because that feels like is the most widely applicable kind of archetypes. And then based on, the particularities of your game and the things your game focuses on mechanically, this is where like your subtypes can come up. But yeah, that was about it. I think I'm about all out of material for tonight. So, do you have any questions? I'm still around for a while. See if you had any questions or any notes, maybe either about what I've just talked about or about maybe how this could apply to your game, to the game you're maybe making for the workshop or for anything else. I'll take another little break because my throat is starting to hurt a little bit. Maybe a 2-minute break. I'll go drink some water. I'll be right back. So if you have any questions in the meantime, ask them and I'll go over them when I'm back. Okay, Feroy, I'm so intimidating. I'm so intimidated about having combat now. Well, that's too bad. I was hoping this would have the opposite effect. I was hoping the the archetype stuff would sort of help demystify enemy design a little. I'm sure you'll pull through. June flower. Nice. I'm happy to hear it. What was the little calculation in the first part of the stream? Do you mean when I was... Yeah, do you mean the attack damage calculation? Yeah, the damage formula. So this was the damage formula for... This was the sort of RPG Maker default damage formula. Which is basically how RPG Maker by default, when you like make a new project, the way it works to calculate damage is 4 times attacker's attack minus 2 times defender's defense. And that does the damage, right? And I was explaining that the reason they set it up this way is that it really simplifies balancing. Because it's set up this way, an enemy that has 50 attack, attacking someone with 50 defense will do exactly 50 damage, right? So when the numbers match, the damage is very predictable. That means in order to balance this out, you just need to make the numbers match and you know that you're an appropriate level, It's really, really simplifies everything that they set it up this way. Now, like I said, one thing I don't like about this is it results in kind of extreme numbers. I kind of prefer 2x attack minus 1x defense. Because that results in slightly because 4x attacks minus 2x defense means that as soon as the attack is a bit higher than defense or a bit lower than defense, it makes a huge difference. So that means the numbers like go kind of crazy, and you need like much higher life numbers to make that count, to make that work. Or otherwise, like as soon as your defense is a little too low, like you take huge damage from attacks. And actually, some also Steel Soldier asked, could 1x attack minus half defense also work? Yes, but that would make the damage differences very small, right? So imagine you have... But that can work, yes. And it might also be easier to calculate in some ways. But that means like someone with 10 attack attacking someone with 5 defense, right? Would result in, I mean, it depends on if it rounds up and down, but it would do like 8 damage instead of 10 for like half the defense, you know? So like the numbers would move very little. So like this would be appropriate for a game that uses very small numbers for everything. Because like you would need like, yeah. This is now in Look Outside, I set it up differently. And I think the way I set it up works well for survival horror type games. I just set it up that it's literally just attack minus defense. Right? In Look Outside, it's literally just attack minus defense for the most part. There's some exceptions. And what this does is that the numbers are just what you see is what you get, is what it does. So like 10 defense reduces damage you take exactly by 10, right? And this means that when you see your stats, you kind of know what you get a bit better, but it's harder to balance. So it's easier on the player to see what's happening, but it's harder on the developer to balance that way. So I would recommend using 2x attack minus 1x defense. That's just easier on you for balancing. It just makes balancing a cinch. So I would really recommend this in most cases. TiddlyWiki, are you assuming the party fully heals after each battle or something similar? That would depend on the kind of game. I was actually talking about this a little bit earlier. It depends on the kind of game. If you have a game that has a lot of resource management, where you have long treks between opportunities to heal up, where you have very finite items, or where you have limited inventory to carry healing items and stuff like this, that's when you need to be a lot more careful. You kind of need to, instead of taking into account the max HP, you kind of have to take into account the total HP available in the level almost. The more the game limits your ability to heal, the more you need to look at HP in terms of the HP in the level instead of the HP in the battle. So it's almost like you're thinking of the game, it's like instead of thinking on a battle per battle basis, you think on a full level basis when it comes to damage amounts and on all that. So that kind of changes how you have to approach. The more you have the more it's like a survival horror thing, or the more it's a resource management thing, the more you have to step back and look at resources at a larger scale, you know? But for a more typical JRPG, you can usually sort of presume players go into battle with full HP, not necessarily with full mana and all these other secondary resources, but usually people, in the way they play those games, they tend to fully heal up between battles. Because like if they're not really like constantly worried about resources, they just want to be safe. Safety becomes way more important and like has a much higher priority in their head than conserving items. Because items are just not as valuable individually then, you know? Let's see. I was planning on most of the game you're solo or maybe have one NPC tagging along, and so I think that narrows down the strategy. Not necessarily. I mean, there's definitely, if you're mostly solo, you kind of have to focus on different things. You have to focus on, you still have to focus on like target priority, right? You still need to think about who I need to attack first, who I need to attack second. The big issue, the big thing about a game where you're mostly solo is that action economy becomes so much more important, right? For Roy? Like action economy, like wasting a single action if you can only do one action per turn is massive, right? And if you're and you're not usually going to be fighting a lot of enemies either, right? So you're not like if you're fighting 4 enemies and you're just one, that your one character takes all of that damage every turn, and every single action is just so important. Now, one thing you could do is literally make your character act more than once per turn. So that way you can still have one character, but your action economy is not as precious, You could have that your character basically like summons things or like has things that adds you more actions or like pseudo party members. Yeah, and it's not just the action economy that gets wild. It's also just the fact that all enemy damage goes to one thing. So you really need to think less about, like, if you're not only fighting one-on-one, you have to not think just about individual attacks, individual attack damage. Now you have to think about enemy group attack damage, right? Because this is like every single enemy group, it's just a train of damage coming your way, I would say it's still doable, but you definitely need to approach balancing differently if you have a game where you're mostly solo or just 2 characters. Yeah, that does complicate. Not exactly complicate. It's just a different approach. Yeah, the balancing is different. You need to focus more on like choosing actions rather than on matching your characters to the right target. You're more at matching your actions to the right target. And also probably you're going to have like different abilities, different things, and these different abilities, you might also kind of like be managing mana or whatever, like, secondary resource you have other than HP. So you're still going to have some of this, like some similar decision making to make there as a player. You're just kind of removing the matching a character to a target part. You're just matching actions and like specific skills to a target instead. Another thing you can do is really focus on item usage. So just using items. Yeah. But yeah, there's a bunch of ways. You can also make it that even though story-wise you're a character that's mostly alone, that might be for tone reasons, like you want your character to feel like this is like a lonely adventure of some kind, or something like that, then you could you could cheat and still have more actions per turn. Maybe you can have like essentially like action points. Like I'm not sure what you're making it with. If you're making it with RPG Maker, you're going to be a bit more limited in how much you can play with the system. But yeah, just acting more than once per turn, or maybe you have a bunch of. Yeah, you can also have gear that gives you more actions per turn. That is a built-in thing in an RPG Maker. You can give yourself more actions. You don't need a plugin for that or anything. Yeah, more actions per turn can work. Or temporarily, like pseudo party members can work. I mean, like a good example is the batter in Off, right? The batter is mostly like a lonely character, but has like these these sort of second, like these party members that are just there to sort of, that basically only appear in battle, right? And that works. That works pretty well. You still feel like you're a single character, and you have these, you know, yeah, yeah. You can have like, if you have like like secondary move types, that can maybe be used alongside your main moves. Stuff like that can help too. Um, you can even have a thing where like you're a single character, but like you have one action per arm. You have your left arm, you have your right arm. That could be a funny thing. I wonder if anyone's done that. You literally just have like left arm actions, right arm actions, and you like equip items to your arms. Maybe you have a head action too, and these are like your party members. Wait, is that what you're doing? Are you doing like a game where your party members are your limbs? I could work. Yeah. But that could be a way to have a thing where you only have one party member, sort of story wise, but mechanically speaking, you still have more actions. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to approach this, to approach sort of the problem, to solve the problem of action economy in a game where you're only one character. It's an interesting problem, and you can also just literally actually embrace the idea of the very limited action economy. That just means if you just need to be very careful. Like in a game with very tight action economy, players are going to get a feel for moves that are useless very quickly. Any move that doesn't 100% always do the thing it's supposed to do, people are never going to use those, you know? Like a move that just has a 50% chance to stun will never be used in a game like this. Unless it also does like a bunch of damage or something. You need to approach things very differently. If every single move is the one thing you do that turn, yeah, the the threshold for what makes something useful goes way up. All right. Anything else? Anything else? I'm not sure if I might have missed something. Hey, how's it doing? Prismatic Void and the Red Elk. How are you doing? I was just I'm kind of at the end of the this week's workshop stream, RPG design stream. Yeah. I mean, I think it depends. Like, I mean, yeah, every single move needing to be useful is generally a good idea. Yeah. It's generally a good idea to try and make everything useful. That's for sure. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, so next session we are going to talk about level design. Yeah, I mean, the next session is going to be Sunday. That's going to be like a an off stream, and I'll be putting together a dungeon. I'll be putting together the enemies of the dungeon. But the next Friday session is going to be about dungeon design. That should be pretty fun. That's another thing I've been looking forward to do. I'll be talking about different. It's going to be a little bit like what I did for enemy design here. I'm going to give like archetypes of dungeons, and that are also similarly meant to sort of give you a starting point when you want to design a dungeon. You know, something that isn't necessarily like a full pre-made idea. It's just sort of, a way to get started. It's like, okay, this dungeon, what do I want to do? Well, I haven't had one of these archetype levels yet, so there you go. Maybe I could go with that, and then that gives you like a starting direction to go with, and it just should help sort of get an idea forward. That's really a lot of having models, having like idea models like this. I feel like half of the use for them is just to make it easier to get started thinking about an idea. It just gives you something so it's not just you're not just working from a blank page. All right, but yeah, that's gonna be next Friday, and yeah, like I said, this coming Sunday I'll be just continuing work on the first dungeon, and I'll be applying some of what I've been talking about tonight to make some enemies for it. So I'll make some sets of enemies, kind of using sort of what I've been talking about today. And yeah, that should be fun. Oh, and before I forget, I have a Patreon now, folks. Please consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you very much. All right, that's going to be it for tonight. Thank you all for watching, and take care.